There's a very tiny robot disguised as a fly, and it's spying on me, and I will catch it. Hey, Doodlebugs, it's Mary. Welcome to the How to Art tutorial. How to art. Let's talk about working with liquid black ink. I'm going to go over some of the materials and techniques that you can use to make ink drawings and paintings. If you're wanting some extra information and images and examples of working with ink, I'm putting some more tutorial tidbits on a new art app called Art Amino. I'm showing you my phone to prove it exists. So Art Amino is a supporter of this channel and a mobile app that connects creators with one another. You can share your own artwork, you can upload blog posts about what you're working on or tutorials, and you can follow other artists and what they're uploading. And they even have a live chat option, a live discussion, so you can reach out and connect with people who are like you. I find that it's very important to put your stuff out there to grow as an artist and improve. But your work is very personal and intimate, and it can be horrifying to put stuff on the internet, for the internet is dark and full of terrors. So that's great to have a mobile app that's just a community of artists and like-minded people. You can download it on iTunes, in the iTunes Store, or Google Play. And if you do, follow me. I'm Mary Doodles. I'll be there. Like I said, I'm going to be posting additional supplemental extra things about the tutorial. Yeah. Check it out. So let's begin by talking about some of the materials you can use for inking. And you can get these at any old art store like Blick's or Utrecht here in the United States. I've even seen them at Michael's craft stores. And you can get them online, and I'll be putting links in the description below to all of the materials I mentioned. Those links will take you to Amazon.com. I recommend using those links because then I get a cut of the action. Then Mama can buy herself a new pen because someday you're gonna die and I need to be prepared. Liquid black India ink is one of my top materials. I use a lot of watercolor, but anytime you see me drawing with black outlines, I'm using liquid India ink, also known as Indian ink, which is weird because I think it came from China. This kind of ink has been used for centuries for calligraphy, drawings, and paintings, and more recently, it's very popular with cartoons and comic book illustrators. You can draw or paint with it, you can dilute it to make gray tones. It's water soluble, so it's very easy to clean, although it will stain clothing, so don't give it to your toddler just yet. And once it's fully dry, it's waterproof, which is why I love using it with watercolors. I can lay down my black lines, and when it's totally dry, you can paint over it. No smudging, no bleeding. For now, I say a good starting point is something like Higgins Black Magic ink. And you can pick up a tiny little 1-ounce bottle, which is plenty. A little bit goes a long way. Wait, they come in pints? If you're anticipating using a lot of ink, they come in pints. Be careful, use caution when transferring these to tinier containers because it's ink. Dip pens. These are the pens that you dip into the ink and draw with. And they come in two parts. There's the handle and the nib. The nib is designed to pull the ink up into it. There's a bunch of different kinds of nibs out there with different purposes, from calligraphy to drawing. They come in different sizes. Some are more flexible and sensitive than others. So it's really a matter of experimenting and figuring out what works for you. I would recommend get something like a drawing pen set from Speedball. It comes with 2 handles, a large and a small, and multiple nibs, and that way you can play around with them and figure out what feels best to you. To use the pens, insert the nib into the handle. It should fit pretty snugly. You'll notice that the tip of the nib has a split down the center. You can see it when you put the nib to paper and add a little bit of pressure. Now that leads to the vent, or the hole in the nib. This is the well that draws up the ink. There is no ink stored within the pen. You'll need to continuously go back to your jar and dip the pen into the ink to load it up. When you dip the pen, you don't want to dip it too deep. Submerge the nib just above the well and be sure to let any excess ink drip off before putting it to paper. It also helps to hold the pen at a flatter angle instead of upright like a ballpoint pen. Technically, you're drawing with a pen, but physically, it's more like handling a brush. Light pressure low angle. Try making strokes that start with a light pressure and then add harder pressure and then light again. And you'll notice that you can affect the thickness of the lines this way. When you run out of ink, just return to the jar as you need to. Practice and get familiar with the feel. You can create fine lines or thick, heavy lines with just one stroke using these pens. That's the magic that they have. There's a charm to them. It's almost like anything you write using these pens will be elegant and timeless. You can also paint with the ink using brushes. From my experience, I prefer using brushes that have longer, softer bristles, like watercolor brushes work very nicely with ink, especially if you're looking for delicate, tiny brushes to do delicate, tiny lines. You can also look for Chinese calligraphy brushes. They look like bamboo brushes, and they're designed for more traditional ink painting, but you can apply them to whatever style inking that you want to do. There's no rules. Who's gonna stop you? Just like with the pen, when you dip your brush into the ink, it's important not to dip it too deep. No further than 2/3 of the hairs should go into the ink, because the brush hairs will naturally want to pull the ink up into them. If you dip it too deep, the ink will get into the glues that hold the hair to the handle, and it will mess up the shape of your brush. After inking, be sure to clean your tools to ensure that they last. Nibs should be removed from the handle and wiped down with a damp towel. Wash out your brushes with soap and water. You can get a specialty brush cleaner at any art store. Also, I find shampoo works just as well. And your brushes smell so good afterwards. Paper, oh, there's so many kinds of papers. If you're using ink for just drawing, I find a good drawing paper is perfect. It's a little bit thicker than regular printer paper, and it holds up nicely. If you want to get nice, crisp lines and have a sturdy paper that you're comfortable using some watery techniques on, look for Bristol board or Vellum Paper, or a paper that is labeled as mixed media. If you're doing watery, washy techniques, try looking into a watercolor paper that's designed to hold a lot of water and not bend as much, though it will bend some. There's also Japanese rice paper, which I honestly do not have a lot of experience with. So if anybody does, please comment below. Let us know what you think about it. I've heard two things. I've heard some people think it's too thin, and I've heard some people say, why is anybody using anything else? This is the best paper in the world. So, I don't know, might be worth a try. Let's talk about technique. Pressure. As I mentioned, the pressure you put on your pen or brush will influence the thickness of your lines, also known as weight. One strength that these materials have is that you can create lines that fluctuate in weight, all in one stroke. Even if you're just making a simple ink outline with no shading, altering the weight of the lines can add depth and imply lighting and really make your drawing pop. Hatching. To create texture or shading, you can make many parallel lines side by side, called hatching. This, I find, is easier with the pen. Create cross-hatching by making a series of crisscross lines side by side. The further apart the lines are, the lighter the tone will be. The closer the lines are to each other, the darker the tone. Hatching can be clean and straight lines, or it can be a jumble of scribbly lines, according to the tone and the effect and the texture that you're going for. Stipple is much like hatching, but instead of lines, you're creating with dots, either using a pen or a brush. The closer together the dots, the darker the tone, the more sparse and spaced, the lighter the tone. Bleeds. Because ink is a water-soluble liquid, it will be attracted to water. You can create a watery effect by laying down clean, clear water on the page. Load up your brush or pen with ink and then tap it onto the wet part of the paper. The ink will flow only where the water is. If the paper's dry, the ink will stay in one place. If the paper's wet, the ink will flow out to fill that wet space. With practice, you can control this chaotic technique and create really cool effects. Dilution. Ink can be diluted with water if you want to get gray tones. You can wash it down in a separate jar or load up your brush with extra water before dipping it into the ink. You can also put ink on the page and quickly add water to it to create a diluted effect. More water gets you lighter tones, less water, darker tones. Splatter. Splatter effects are messy, chaotic, and fun. Load up your brush with ink and maybe a little extra water to loosen it up. Lightly tap or flick your brush toward the page. It takes some practice getting used to how to control these splatters, as much as you can control them, but it looks really cool. Experiment, play, sketch, doodle, fill your sketchbook with thousands of terrible ink drawings. The more you handle it, the more comfortable you'll be working with liquid black India ink. I hope this video was helpful to you. And like I said, all of the materials I mentioned, I have links to where you can find them online in the description below. Go check that out. And be sure to look me up on Art Amino. I've got more how-to art videos on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/MaryDoodles. You can go there and find tutorials on hand drawings, painting with watercolor, shading, all the things. If there's a topic that you don't see there that you're curious about though, you can comment or tweet me at MaryDoodles. Let me know what you want to see. You can also leave any questions on inking below. I will do my best to get to you. I'm sure other artists out there will also help out with their advice. Thank you very much for watching. Doodle on, dear doodlebugs. I just watched Mad Max. Explosion!